Hello, and I don't know why my room looks like I have a fisheye lens. It's really strange. Always strange new things when I get on live, which is really exciting, and that's obviously what keeps people hopping on lives. I really don't know why it looks like I have a fisheye lens. This is bizarre. So, on to our topic. I wanted to talk about the fact that your book is not a one man or one woman show. What do I mean by that? Something I love to say is your book isn't created in a vacuum for many, many, many reasons. Because to start with, your story is not something that just, popped into your head. Even if you are channeling your book, and I know a lot of people out there are channeling their books, it's not something that you just went, oh, here we go, here's this book, bleh, out on the page. It's something that is a collaboration. The different things that you've gone through in your life have affected it. The different books that you've read have affected it. I mean, art is a conversation, right? So when you're reading other books, you're seeing, oh, this author did this. I really like what they did, or this author did this, and I don't like what they did. Every single thing that you take in is something that is impacting your work. So that's the first part of why it's not created in a vacuum. The second part is whenever you do write a book, you have to actually get it out to the world. And that involves working with professionals. I mean, obviously, you're not going to handwrite your book in your notebook and, copy it like the monks used to do with books, a few hundred years ago, where they would sit down and write, okay, every single word from this page, every single word. You're not going to do it that way. You're going to go through a publisher, right? Whether you're doing it traditional, whether you're doing hybrid or self-publishing. Again, not created in a vacuum. You're not sitting there in your home, in your office, your dungeon, wherever it is you are, where you're writing and nobody else is around, nobody else is impacting this at all. There's impact all the way through the process, from the idea stage clear through the publishing stage. And I have had people tell me in the past, I don't hear this as often anymore because I think that there's a big shift in, who I've been talking to, as well as what's expected out of a self-published book. I've had people tell me, oh, I don't need an editor. I'll be fine. My neighbor is an English teacher. I'll just ask her if she can read my book. Even if she's really nice, you probably don't just want to say, hey, would you read my book, without giving her some sort of compensation if you're expecting editing out of it. At least bake her a loaf of banana bread. But I see a lot more people today looking for professionals to work with because you want your book to look like you've worked with professionals, right? If you're putting your name on something, you don't want it to look like, your 5-year-old drew the cover, or my 5-year-old's a fantastic artist, but I really wouldn't trust her to draw the cover on one of my books. You wouldn't want to put a selfie on the front of your book, something that you took on your cell phone. You'd want something that looks more professional. So you want the interior to look professional too. And this is where I get a lot of questions about, like, what does a writing coach do? What does an editor do? What are the different pieces that put all this thing together that make it look professional? So I wanted to cover a little bit of that today. And I see somebody's watching. Hello. Not sure who you are. If you want to say, oh, hey, just popped up. Hi, Kara. I want to talk about, like, what a writing coach does to start. So if you sit down with somebody who's coaching you through the book process, they're going to be able to see things that you aren't going to see. They might spot something in, how you have your outline and say, I think that this would be better suited for this chapter. Or what do you mean by this? Let's really flesh out this story. This is the meat of the book. They're going to give you things like that that help you take it from, I have this idea, I kind of have an outline, to now I'm really excited to work on this book. I really want to get through it, and I want to put it out because I know it's specifically written for my audience. I know that it's full of stuff that they need, not just, hey, I had an idea. Because if you're putting out a book that isn't for your ideal audience, you're going to run into all kinds of issues with, people reading it who shouldn't be reading it, or people who really need to read it and they never spot it because, you know, the marketing's off, the interior's off, the back of the cover writing is off. Different things that your book coach would be able to spot and clean up and say, hey, this is really going to make you shine. Why don't we put this here? Let's talk more about this piece. This is really what we need to be talking about. Those are just some of the things that I usually catch whenever I'm working with somebody. Um, and it's really helpful for them because then they aren't sitting there going, well, should I talk about this? Should I not talk about this? Is this too dark? Is this too scary? Does this sound ridiculous? Is this really going to connect? Is this something that other people need to hear? Because, you know, sometimes as a coach, you get in your own head and you think, okay, this is something that, you know, when I was working with this person, yes, she said that, but is that pretty common? That's not something I've polled my clients about. So there are some different perspectives that you might see working with a coach that you wouldn't see just, you know, sitting down and writing your book by yourself. Because the goal of having a writing coach is to actually have you write the best book that you possibly could, the right one for your audience, the right one for your industry, the right one for your specific brand. And you can go online and you can find all kinds of information out there about how to write a good book, how to write a good story, characters and plot, and yada, yada, yada. But you're not going to get something specific to you, your brand, and your industry unless you're working with a coach. So there's that. After that is when you're working with an editor. And this is a different piece altogether. So I do want to clarify what those two different people do. When you're working with an editor, they are not necessarily saying, hey, go in and change all of this. I know my company offers developmental editing and copy editing. If you do developmental editing, that is a lot of like shifting stuff around, cleaning things up, rewriting a lot of sentences. It's like major changes, whereas copy editing is just tightening it up a little bit, trimming out some of the words that don't belong, making a few suggestions, making sure that you didn't say something that you totally didn't mean to say. Now, if you've worked with a coach, usually the coach will catch most of that stuff, but you know, sometimes that stuff slips through, especially if your coach has been going over it and over it and over it and over it, which is why I actually ended up hiring editors instead of continuing to do it myself, because sometimes I would miss something because I know the book just as well as the author knows the book. So it really helps to have that second set of eyes on your book, and working with a professional editor, of course. Um, you know, I have had people in the past tell me, oh, my mom's an editor, or not my mom's an editor. My mom edits my stuff, or my, you know, my friend likes to read books, so I'm just going to have her edit it. Um, and a lot of times it's like, okay, that's better than nothing, but you really have to step back and say, is this going to give me the best book I possibly could put out? Because if you're cheaping out on the edit, here's the thing, you're either going to hear about it in the editing phase or you're going to hear about it in the Amazon reviews. And you know, people who don't know you are not going to pull punches. They're just going to say, hey, there's a lot of editing mistakes. This is going on. I don't understand what she's talking about. The whole second half of the book doesn't make any sense. And if you want to hear that from a stranger online, you know, that's your business really. But for me, I would much rather have somebody who I have selected, who I trust, that I can say, okay, they're going to be able to spot any issues. They're going to be able to tweak some things and make it clean. They're going to catch, you know, any errors that I've introduced. So if I'm writing something, I might, you know, chop out a sentence and forget one of the words. You don't want to end up with something like that in a final print just because it doesn't look clean. You want it to look neat and tight and professional. So those are the major differences between a coach and an editor. And you know, regardless of what you're doing, always, always, always work with somebody professional. You will find people who are willing to like sell their soul to edit your book. If it gives you an icky feeling, which is what it does for me, move past that. find somebody else. Because if they are sitting there going, oh, let me do it, let me do it, let me do it, they might be coming from a place of, yes, I really want to do it, I love doing this, but they're also, by undercharging, they're devaluing themselves, they're devaluing their service, and they also might not value the work that they're doing on your book very much either. So there's always that to consider when you are shopping around for editors. So that's the basics on what they do. And I wanted to talk too about the fact that when you're self-publishing your books, you get to pick the people that you're working with, which is wonderful. And I consider that to be a bonus because I do like having that kind of control. But you want it to be people who are of the same caliber that like the big five are selecting. So they don't just, hire their neighbor to do editing. They have professional editors. They have people who have a background in it. They have people who have reviewed books before, people who know what they're doing. And if you're stepping out and saying, hey, I'm a professional in this space and I really want to stake my claim as a leader, then you need to have a book that says, I am a leader, I am a professional, and I'm here to play. You don't want people to think that you're not really stepping up, that you're kind of like, all right, check the list, got a book out this year, what's next? And move on, because you just put a ton of work into something, right? If you're putting that much work in, you want it to be professional. You want it to look good for you. There's no point in slapping your name on something and just going, all right, moving right along, next thing. So Kara says, that's a good point. I've devalued myself before when asked to edit something for people. Kara, I have too. I've done this before. Years ago when I started my business, I was like, oh, okay, I have to think about what people are willing to pay, and everybody thinks artists are, cheap and broke. So that means I have to be cheap and broke. But that doesn't make me look like a professional. That makes me look desperate. And, Kara, I know you, and I know that you do amazing work. So I do hope that when you're working on stuff that your pricing is at that professional level. And anyone else who's watching this, much love to you. And I hope that you are charging your worth, because good editing is golden. It really is. I've received some feedback before that was just like, oh my God. And some of my editors, some of the stuff I've seen them do to books, I'm like, wow, okay, I did not spot that because I knew that book so well in my heart that I managed to skip over that. So yes, yeah, Kara says truth, and you're welcome. Yeah, so if you are shooting for working with one of the big five, it does behoove you to work with a coach or even an editor if you are working on your book and you feel more comfortable working with an editor before you send it off, because they want people who look professional, who are standing out, who are stepping up and saying, hey, I've got this background, I've got this information, and this is what I want to do. And if you're doing self-publishing, same sort of thing, because you are, you're a little more, naked is the word that's coming to mind. So you're a little more naked when you're doing your own show here. So you really do have to be selective about who you're working with, who you're bringing in to help you with that book and get it out there. And I mentioned before, I've had some people come to me and say, hey, I'm looking for an editor, but I need the process to be fast. I need it to be cheap. And even sometimes when you're working on a project, you get into that stubborn mode where you're like, I'm awesome and I can do it all myself. And the truth is, like, you don't have to prove anything to yourself. What you need to do is say, I have enough faith in how awesome this information is, that I am willing to step up and invest in this project. I'm willing to say, this is a good project and I want it to be the best that it possibly can. So that's just my 2 cents on coaches and editors and what they do and the value that they bring to your project, because you don't want to create in a vacuum. Don't create in a vacuum, because vacuums suck, right? And you don't want to suck. And So, you know, when you do sit down, if you start feeling that like stubborn, like, yeah, I'm gonna do this myself, um, take a deep breath and look around and think about all the wonderful things that have been, you know, created. Think about, you know, books, think about works of art. Like nobody is sitting in their basement coming up with this stuff without any influence from the outside world. And thank you, Kara, for laughing at my cheesy joke. Um, uh, you know, nobody's sitting there by themselves creating. You know, that's just something to keep in mind. The books that you read every day that you've seen published by the Big Five, they are not created in a vacuum. They are created by a very powerful group of professionals that are putting out the best book that that author possibly could. So when you are doing your book, think of it that way. How can I create a powerful group of people around me to support my vision for this book? How can we put out the best book possible for my business, my brand, my industry? So if you are watching this on the replay and you have comments or you want to laugh at my cheesy joke, I much appreciate that. And you can comment and I will respond. But other than that, have a great day, have a great week. I'm going to be back in here, you know, with questions and stuff, talking more about this because I know it's a really important topic. So enjoy, laugh at my jokes. I'll see you soon.